I would take Richard Hart at his word. I don't really think he speaks in symbolism or tries to misdirect people. I've heard him in the past say very directly that he wants to, he's not trying to time the market. He wants to launch as soon as possible because the quicker that you launch, with any project, the quicker the curve kind of develops itself on the price chart. That's pretty much what he said. In terms of this FUD or these lawsuits or whatever this is, does it affect things? In my opinion, if I were in his shoes with the limited knowledge I have, I would say that yeah, I would want to hurry up and get this thing out. Regardless of the SEC, I would want to do that anyway. I doubt that's really changing anything, just logically speaking. So, and I also, I don't know the contents of that paperwork, and I don't know what they're trying to get out. I don't know why anything is happening. So we just have to proceed business as usual, and I think that is going to happen, as evidenced by kind of everybody here today, what we're building, what initiatives we're trying to push forward, the fact that we're all together right now talking about this. We're letting the community know that this is not slowing anything down on our end, and I don't think it's going to slow anything down on Richard's end, personally.
Funding, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things. You guys have been hearing for many years Richard's narrative about horizontal scaling. And as builders, as you go forward on your individual projects, it may be a few years before there's expensive transactions on Pulsechain. And if those transactions become expensive, it's my opinion that there'll be horizontal scaling and your projects will be forked again. So just keep that in mind. If there's some element of technology that you can incorporate or some kind of planning about the expansion of your customer base, increasing the number of users for your particular product, where effectively Pulsechain is the dumb pipe. Richard said that about Ethereum, that eventually it should become the dumb pipe to transport value. And I think that that's a good narrative. I think horizontal scaling has its place. So, and that's very interesting.
Katie, go ahead.
Hey guys, I just wanted to add on to what Jesse and Walrus and everybody was saying. On top of having a bridging platform and projects already in development for Pulsechain, we do have Pulsex and the Fixer bot. And the Fixer bot, in my opinion, will bring a lot of attention to Pulsechain in the sense that it goes out and buys up pairs in Ethereum right now. And essentially there will be quite thin liquidity in Pulsex because it's only buying up ETH pairs, not USDC to a token pair. So the liquidity will be semi-thin, but at the same time, it will be highly liquid DEX, where essentially on other forks or other chains that you see, the liquidity has to be put up by the people that are deploying the chain or projects that are coming through. So we're deploying with liquidity already on our chain. And essentially, if it is semi-thin liquidity, people are buying and selling out of those pairs that are already up, it will make price volatility at the start of Pulsex and Pulsechain, which will bring a lot of attention as well, because people now have a free copy of their coins. Tokens on the other side are extremely volatile. And as we all know, volatility goes both ways, and it does draw a lot of attention. So there is many aspects, not just bridging platform or education or the fact that our community is building so many projects that bring utility to the chain. So we're not just building meme coins, we are building NFT marketplaces and things that people can utilize, like liquid loans and the liquid loans front end and cross-chain solutions that actually bring on-chain volume. So we have on-chain volume and we have a DEX that are going to draw a lot of attention. So for me, Pulsechain, nothing really changes in the sentiment or the notions that were pre-existent prior to the change in the fork.
Any questions? You didn't raise your hand, but do you have any questions? Minson's boss.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for having me on. First off, I want to say thanks to you for hosting this, and thanks for everyone for being here. Yeah, I got maybe what's likely to be a straightforward question. Given the recent news that Pulsechain is at ETH2 fork, is it reasonable to assume that the Pulsechain staking rewards are likely to eventually be similar to what the ETH staking rewards are today, which is about 4%? How are you guys thinking about the staking reward situation?
Yeah, so the reality is we don't know. There has to be some changes to ETH2 consensus. We can't be a 100% clone of ETH because ETH is inflationary, right? Even though it's trending towards deflationary nowadays. The reality is in Pulsechain is that there will never be any new tokens created, right? And I don't believe that's changed. I've not heard anything that indicates that that's changed. So in that case, that means all staking rewards are going to come down to percentage of fees. I'm for the moment assuming that it's the same as it always has been. So in those cases, if you're thinking about ETH2 consensus versus the potential consensus we had before, there's probability that delegation is no longer directly a thing and that people will just all be validators. And in that case, that may fragment rewards to a degree. So it's going to come down to really, once we know more information about, are the fees going to remain the same? Is it still 100% deflationary? Are validators all now competing for portions of those fees, or do they get the whole fee when they do it? I mean, there's some unanswered questions here that we're kind of intentionally, I think, being kept in the dark at the moment until that's all ironed out and truly figured out. But I expect previous to Pulsechain, a lot of people anticipated a lot of very large validators being propped up by all the delegations. If that's no longer a thing, I think we'll actually end up with a much more decentralized earnings and validation model. So that may not directly answer your question, but the reality is we're still kind of waiting to see what that's exactly going to look like, and we probably won't know that till V3.
I think an interesting point to that is if staking ends up going very similar to the ETH 2.0 route on Pulsechain. Let's just make it up, right? Nobody knows, to your point. Nobody knows. So let's just assume maybe it goes that route. Do we have in Pulsechain eventually, and this would almost be a great problem to have because it means a lot of success in a lot of areas, would we have the same challenge with centralization on the staking side of things and on the validation side of things if centralized exchanges were to then start doing what they're doing with the ETH proof of stake with Pulsechain proof of stake as well? Now, I say that would be a wonderful problem to have because that means many centralized exchanges are then embracing Pulsechain, supporting it, listing it, and allowing people to then centralize their staking through their platforms, which would be, in my mind, a major, major win and a major sign of legitimization for the chain. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question, and what I kind of think is likely to happen. I'm kind of just running through scenarios in my head here. There's one thing we don't have, and that is we're not going to have a centralized exchange presumably day one. The reason exchanges dominate validation on ETH is because they're the biggest holders of ETH, right? They hold everyone else's ETH. The vast majority of it is on a centralized exchange. On Pulsechain, I don't expect that to be the case because of that whole 10,000x supply thing, right? A lot of the biggest holders on Pulsechain when it launches will be people who participated. And in that scenario, how many of them have the technical prowess to set up validators? I'm not sure. We may see some efforts of people trying to put together centralized validator teams. That might be a valid thing. But do I think it will be centralized exchanges? That's a hard question. I don't know. I don't see, if we're adopted by a centralized exchange, I see it being difficult for them to acquire enough pulse for them to actually become a major, major player simply from the fact of the majority of the people in this community are very anti-centralized exchange. So, it's hard to say, but I do think it's likely that we will see validator pooling of sorts, similar to how we've seen sacrafice pooling of sorts kind of come out of the woodwork. It wouldn't blow me away to see that kind of stuff come out, when it ends up being an actual product.